morning, Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome if you're in the room, welcome if you're online. Shabbat Shalom. We continue on page 74 of our prayer book with Ma Tovu. How good it is that we can gather, and how good our places of worship are, our communities that we're creating. On page 76, a blessing for our physical bodies. page 79. Read together at the bottom of the page. My soul came to me pure, drawn from the reservoir of the holy. All the time it remains within me, I am thankful for its thirst for compassion and justice. Let my eyes behold the beauty of all creatures. Let my hands know the privilege of righteous deeds. Baruch atah Adonai asher b'yado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basar ish. Page 83. Are you really doing this?
Sure. As I awaken, let this be my thought. May my day be filled with acts of loving kindness. Let me be drawn to learning and discernment, and may my actions be shaped by mitzvot. Keep me from iniquity, disgrace, and sin. May I not be overwhelmed by temptation or despair. Distance me from evil people and false friends. Let me cultivate a life of goodness. May my hands reach out in kindness, and I will serve God through acts of righteousness. Together, today and every day, may I merit your mercy by living my life with compassion and love. Holy One of blessing, draw me to your words. Teach me the art of sacred living. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael.
On page 94 is Baruch She'amar. Greg?
So, Baruch She'amar, we thank God for creating the world with words. That world is whatever God wanted it to be, and we thank God for making it exactly that way every time. Responses are Baruch Hu, praise God, and Baruch Shemo, praise God's name.
מרחם על הארץ, ברוך מרחם על הבריות, ברוך משלם שכר טוב לרעיו, ברוך חי לעד וקיים לנצח,
Baruch Shemo.
ברוך תודה ומציר,
Baruch Shemo.
Turn the page, excuse me, for the Psalm for Shabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat.
Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. Tov lehodot אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללוך סלע.
אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו.
תהילה לדוד, ארומימך אלוהי המלך, ואברך שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום אברכך, והללה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, בלי גדולתו אין חקר.
גבור לדר ישבח מעשיך, וגבורתך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
ועזוז נפתך יאמרו, וגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר רב טובך יביאו, וצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, זוקף לך הכפופים.
הנה כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך, ומשפיע לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קוראיו, כל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה. הללו אל בקודשו, הללו ברכי עוזו, הללו בגבורותיו, הללו קרוב כולו. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. הללו בתיגה שופר, הללו בנדר וכינור, הללו בצוף ומחול, הללו במיני ועוגב. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. הללו בצלצלי שמה, הללו בצלצלי תרועה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה. On page 102, Ilu Finu. With Psalm 150, we say we're bringing everything we've got. And with Ilu Finu, we're saying that even if we brought everything, we could still bring more to praise God. Ilu Finu, Malay Shira Kayam, Ulshonenu Rinakamon, Kala. Ilu Finu, Malay Shira Kayam. this section to a close with the blessing on page 105. Berachot ve'odot me'ata ve'ad olam, Baruch atah Adonai, El melech gadol batishbachot, El ha'odot Adonai niflaot, Habocher b'shirei zimra, Melech elchei olamim. Yitgadol ve'yitkadash shemei rabah, ve'almad yivrach irutei ve'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yom echon, u'b'chayei tachol be'Yisrael. Ba'olam u'b'zman karev ve'yimeru Amen. Yehi shmira v'mevarach le'olam ul'ol me'al mayan yitbarach. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'al v'yitromam v'yitnaseh ve'yitadal ve'yitaleh ve'yitalal shemir kodesho richu leila min kol birchata ve'shirata tush bechata lenechemata tamiran be'alma ve'yimeru Amen.
Please rise and body your spirit as you're able for Baruchu.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch
atah Adonai,
Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Yotzer or uvorei choshech, Oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, Hameir la'aretz v'jarim Allaha b'rachamim, U'tuvo machadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh b'reshit. Ma'arabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titvarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shavach ma'aseh yadecha, al morei or sha'asita yafarucha sela.
Or Chadash.
Al Zion Ta'ir, v'nizkach kulanu mehira la'oro, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer ha'me'orot. The next page, how deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. This week's Torah portion, teaching us the laws of life. Merciful One, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. Down at the bottom, we join together. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah. Focus our minds on your mitzvot. Unite our hearts in love and reverence for your name. Then we will never feel shame, never deserve rebuke,
and never stumble. Having trusted in your great
and awesome holiness, we shall celebrate your salvation with joy.
Gather us in peace from the four corners of the earth.
And lead us
Lead us upright to our land. For you, O God, work wonders. You chose us. Truly, you drew us near to your great name. We might acknowledge you, declaring you one in love.
Praise be you, Adonai, who chooses your people Israel in love.
Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'mo Yisrael, be'ahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem kevod malchuto le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated. Continue on page 116.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם בארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, amen.
On page 119. Life without integrity is like loosely hanging threads, easily fraying from the main cloth. While in acts of piety we learn to understand that every instant is like a thread raveling out of eternity to form a delicate tassel. We must not cast off the threads, but weave them into the design of an eternal fabric. Each day points to eternity. The fate of all time depends upon a single moment. And we sort of isolate that moment as a moment of redemption and promise. Micha Mocha, page 122.
אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו לשמרות, הכתוב על יד נביא אחד, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מדיר שמך, מדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. תשיבך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. On page 132, we continue with Yismachu, celebrating Shabbat. We follow that with our own silent prayers.
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת
pray silently.
Continue with the service for the reading of the Torah on Shabbat on page 244. When we open the ark, please rise in body or spirit. Page 244.
In kamocha Elohim Adonai, in kemaasecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechol dor vador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai meluch, le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yitzhin, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim, heitiv havirtzot. יתפללו לאדוני איתי, ונרוממו שמו יחדיו. לך אדוני הגדולה, והגבורה, והתפארת, והנצח וההוד. כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה, והמתנשא בכל ראש. על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על שלושה דברים,
על שלושה דברים העולם עומד,
על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד.
Our Torah reading may be found on page 520 of the Torah commentary. Make sure my microphone's on here. Okay, page 520 of the Torah commentary. It's the fifth aliyah of the portion, Mishpatim, beginning with verse 6. Right? Molly will be reading the fifth aliyah. For our aliyah, we call Drew Greenberg, Greenwald, Iceberg.
Iceberg, Goldberg.
One called worse.
Greenwald, hold on. I was all worried about your Hebrew name, so I spaced out the second syllable of your real, okay. Ya'amod, Ephraim ben Dover la Torah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorah.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et toroto. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. לא תטה משפט אביונך וריבו, מפר שקר תרחק ונקי בצדיק אל תהרוג, כי לא אצדיק רשע. ושוחד לא תיקח, כי השוחד יעבר פיכם, וסלף דברי צדיקים. וגר לא תלחץ, ואתם יראתם את נפש הגר, כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים. 6 שנים תזרע את ארצך, ואספת את תבואתה, והשביעית תשמטנה ונטשת. ואוכלו אביוני עמך, ויתרום תאכל חיית השדה, כן תעשה לחמך לזיתך. 6 ימים תעשה מעשיך, וביום השביעי תשבות למען ינוח שורך וחמורך. וינפש בין אמתך והגר. ובכל אשר אמרתי עליכם תשמרו, ושם אלוהים אחרים לא תזכירו, לא יישמע על פיך. 3 רגלים תחוג לי בשנה, את חג המצות תשמור, 7 ימים תאכל מצות, כאשר ציוויתיך למועד חודש האביב, כי בו יצאת ממצרים, ולא יראו פני רקם, בחג הקציר יכרה מעשיך, אשר תזרוע בשדה, בחג האסיף בצאת השנה, באספך את מעשיך מן השדה. 3 פעמים בשנה יראה כל זכורך על פני אדוני. לא תזבח על חמץ דם זבחי, ולא ילים חלב חגי עד בוקר. ראשית ביקורי אדמתך תביא בית אדוני אלוהיך, לא תבשל גדי וחלב עמו.
You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. Keep far from a false charge. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but in the 7th you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor, in order that your ox and your ass may rest, and that your homeborn slave and the stranger may be refreshed. That's interesting. There's nothing about you. It's just about the people with you. Be on guard concerning all that I have told you. Make no mention of the names of other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you shall hold a festival for me. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time in the month of Aviv. For in it you went forth from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And the feast of the harvest, of the first fruits of your work, of what you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the results of your work from the field. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Sovereign, the Eternal. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the fat of my festal offering shall not be left until morning. The choice fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Eternal your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat imet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Thank you.
Shakach.
Thank you, Molly. Continue now with Misha Barach. We'll do Misha Barach first, and then we'll do a blessing for good things. So we turn to page 253 in our prayer book. For the blessing, for Misha Barach, for healing. Let's get this here. It's an opportunity to think of our family members, our friends, who need of healing of body, healing of spirit, and those whose names we don't know, who are this morning also in need of healing. This morning we hold in our hearts Bob Alexander, Sally Alexander, Ira Altschuler, Willie Anderson, Ann Barber, Howard Bregman, Daniel Chen, Fern Diamond, Phyllis Didion, Anna Gitlitz, Ann Fay, Judy Forrest, Ken Franklin, Piers Haggard, Gary Henry, David Mordechai HaKohen, Naum Kaplan, Sylvia Kasparowski, Natalie Klein, Lee Kramer, Albert Lepre, Susan Lother, Hinda Sarabat Khana Pearl, Brian Martino, Nancy McGahan, Jonathan Miller, Edward Mims, Glenn Myers, Joanne Newman, Till Oster, Caleb Piper, Lev Podorovsky, Naftali Ben Riva, Mike Rosen, Lanny Seed, Adam Schusterman, John Spear, Jackie Student, Carolyn Turner, Colleen Wolfson, Martin Zimmerman. Are their names to me Shabbat this morning?
Harriet Becker.
Page 253. Actually, page 373. Page 373. We'll move to a moment of celebration, and it would be my honor to invite Carol and Salem Lehman to the Biba. Carol and Salem are celebrating 50 years of married life. Come on up.
Talk about
When was it? What is the anniversary date?
today.
Today.
50 years ago right now, I was getting a haircut.
50 years ago right now, he was getting a haircut. And you?
Getting my hair done.
All right, I was all about hair. So Mazel Tov, first of all.
Thank you.
And secondly, what a wonderful thing to bring your anniversary celebration here. Your children and grandson are here, which is just as it should be, and how wonderful for you. Rachel, it's Rachel, right? Did you have trouble getting over since you have to go around the bridge? Yeah, I went the other way too. So everyone got here. So I asked you just a few questions about your relationship, really, just as a way for me to know who I'm talking to a little bit as a couple, because we know both of you in this congregation as really strong individuals, dedicated to service, so involved with all of the aspects of our congregational life, and really become essential members, and we're so grateful for that. I don't know how long you've lived in Pittsburgh, but it seems like ever since you got here, you landed and got started with being involved with the community and how lucky for us. So when I asked you about your relationship, you basically, Carol told me that on the second date you were pretty much convinced this was Bashert, this was your person, and for his part, Salem thought you were pretty cute. But what's really important about what you said and what is true is that in the 50 years, you've both grown as individuals and as a couple and have made this beautiful family and this legacy. And for 50 years, you supported each other through that growth process. And it would, the fact that 50 years ago you're getting your hair done and 50 years later you're standing here together with your family, like how remarkable and how wonderful that is.
Nice, very
Yeah, it's more than nice. It's really kind of miraculous in lots of different ways. And so I hope that you continue to see each other as cute and as, there you go, and as your person. And Carol, I think you also said best friend.
Yes.
So
It is.
one of the things I want to mention when I'm talking about the Torah portion is just we're in the process of, as a Jewish people, it's this time in the Torah of becoming who we're going to be. And I would not say that you're done becoming, because for sure, as long as we're living and breathing, we're becoming. But I hope you have an opportunity to just really rejoice in and appreciate and honor what the two of you have become for one another and to your family, and just acknowledge that, and gratitude and grace and all those things that come with that, because 50 years is an important milestone.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but people like to joke about it in terms of longevity, but I think it's a decision, that we make every day, that we're going to be a couple and that this is going to be a family. So mazel tov to you.
Thank
I don't
you
want to
very
go
much.
too close to you, but we are double mass, so I will ask God's blessing on you, as I hope you had the blessing at your wedding. I imagine that you did.
Oh, yeah.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you.
Ken Yeratzon.
Adonai panav elecha v'yuchanecha. May you feel God's presence. May you feel God's face shining on you.
Ken Yeratzon.
Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May you feel peace, wholeness in your hearts, and gratitude for that sense of peace and wholeness, and may that bubble up and spread to more peace in the world.
Ken Yeratzon.
Amen.
Mazel tov. And
Thank
so
you
much
very
for being.
much.
Mazel tov.
You can't kiss through the mask, but
We're trying hard.
there's always later. Yeah. And I understand that there are some treats that we will be able to take with us this afternoon when we leave services to celebrate with you. So thank you for that. Mazel tov to your whole family. So I'm going to, let's dress the Torah. So that's on page 252. Please rise.
Yesod HaTorah asher samochem b'nei Yisrael. Al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la. Ya la la la, ya la 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 la.
May be seated. So I'd like to share a few thoughts about Mishpatim. We had a really interesting Torah study this morning that Bert Schumann conducted, which is in a lot of ways kind of an overview of Mishpatim, but overview of Mishpatim really means an overview of Jewish life, because Mishpatim means laws, and there are a lot of laws that are in this portion, as you just heard from Molly's reading. All different kinds of laws that have to do with ethical behavior, moral behavior, things that have to do with how we treat one another, slaves and money and animals. So I hinted a little bit at this when I was talking to Salem and Carol, but I think that this Torah portion starts us on the journey of becoming people. So Mordechai Kaplan, who was the founder of Reconstructing Judaism, it wasn't called that at the time, it was called Reconstructionist Judaism, but today it's called Reconstructing Judaism. He said that there were three possible ways of identifying with the religious community. One is behaving, and just think about this for yourselves, how you might feel like you access Judaism: behaving, believing, belonging. And I suggest that this Torah portion encourages us to think of becoming, like how are we growing? How are we growing as individuals, as families, as a Jewish people, as a Jewish community? How are we becoming? It's, we're always in the process of becoming. So with this Mishpatim, we begin basically a new chapter in our story. We've made our way from the family stories in Genesis, where we read about all of our family members, and Moses at the beginning of Exodus. We've begun our years of wandering through the desert. We know that we're only at the very beginning, that there's going to be 40 more years of challenges and growth. And now we have something different that's going to happen. We're not going to have so many stories. We're going to have a lot more teachings, a lot more instruction. Because last week at Revelation of Mount Sinai, we received the Torah, the highlight of those that we read, the 10 Commandments. This is kind of like the morning after, right? So we have the 10 Commandments and then what comes next. It's continuation. So the portion begins, we didn't read from the beginning of the Torah portion, but it begins, Ve'ela Mishpatim, and these are the rules. It begins with an and because it's all a continuation, right? We don't have a hard stop at the end of the 10 Commandments. We have, and these are the laws. These are the rules that that Moses, you should set before the people. So now it's our job as Jews or as Israelites to have taken our stories and to weave the stories in with our teachings and to come up with what's going to look like a Jewish people and Jewish practice. So I'm going to there's a little story here about how the rabbis understood the process of connecting story and law. So here's this classic tale that reminds us of the remarkable process of how the entirety of Jewish practice and belief owes itself to the memory of the experiences of those who came before us and our own experiences. So it's just kind of how it's all mixed together. So two writers rushed into the Beit Midrash, the study hall of the Raziner Rebbe. They wanted him to write the preface to their respective books. One had a book on Jewish law, and the other had a book on Agada, the tales and the lore of the Talmud. So we have one is like the stories, and we have one, the law. And the law scholar was sure the Rebbe would see him first because he was emphasizing ritual practice, and that's, right, essential. But the rabbi said, no, he would see the storyteller first, telling him our Torah begins with stories, and were it not from the stories, we would have no basis for the mitzvot that follows. So our tradition is a blending of our stories, our experiences, what did we learn from them, and then the laws that kind of emerge from those experiences. It is the stories that bring to life all that we do and make sure that others can learn from our experiences. So, having said that, what is the first law in this Torah portion? If you were Torah study this morning, you know that it was what to do when we acquire a Hebrew slave. It says ki. Ki is the first word, ki, which you could translate to if you acquire a Hebrew slave or when you acquire a Hebrew slave. And that should be kind of alarming Why would that be alarming? That's a real question. Why would that be alarming? It's not a rhetorical question. That's what the first law that we hear here.
Hebrews were just slaves in Egypt, now required to.
Exactly. How is it possible that, given our experience, what I just said, that Jewish life is a combination of stories and and our experience, the laws that come out of that? How is it possible? How does that even make any sense that our first laws would be an assumption that we were going to have slaves, right? If and when we have slaves, here's how to treat them. Right, so I agree. I think it just seems so, it should seem so alarming and unsettling. So here's the whole rule, here's the whole part that has to do with it. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall work for 6 years, and in the 7th year he shall go out to freedom without charge. Now this is a masculine for a reason. If he comes in alone, he shall go out alone. If he is a married man, his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free, the master shall bring him to the judges, and he shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. It's basically a sign that he wasn't willing to leave. So I just want to say that I would love if the first commandment after us leaving after the 10 Commandments and all the Revelation, the first one in Mishpatim would be, you should have no slaves. Like, that's what I would love to see, right? We should have no slaves. You know what it means. In this portion today, we know the feelings, even more than the experience, right? We know the feelings. Why doesn't it just say you should have no more slaves? So the reality is that the ancient mind, at this point, couldn't yet see a world without slavery. Slavery existed everywhere, and these laws are a way to make it more gentle, more compassionate, more human. It's not perfect. So I just want to say that we shouldn't, even though I wanted to say that there should be no slaves, we have to understand we have to understand the historical context, right? And I would never for a moment suggest that we're smarter than they were, that now we can say there should be no slavery, because, it wasn't until 20th century that Americans figured out that voting is a right for every person, every single citizen. So it was just a few years ago, really, in the history of humanity. So we don't have any business thinking we're smarter than they were. So the laws of Mount Sinai were given to people who were just living in a world where slavery was common. It was what everybody did. Everywhere, though, slavery was brutal and cruel, and so we're commanded to take these little steps towards making it less painful. So that leads me to this idea of becoming, right? It wouldn't be reasonable in that time to just outlaw slavery, but what can we do given slavery is a given, which all of us today can't even fathom, but it's a given. How can we make it better? And these laws help to make it better. There's a time limit. You have a right to stay with your family. If you think about American slavery, there was no end limit. The only end of slavery was the end of slavery, right? The end of enslavement was the end of slavery. You didn't get to choose that your family went with you. In most cases, you didn't go with your family. So these are little, they may seem little, but we have to understand the historical context. And I would say that it's this act of becoming. Eventually, the rabbis in later times figured out ways to eliminate slavery so that today there's no slavery, right? So after the Torah times, the rabbinic times, we're able to use these first baby steps and have a tradition that became one that prohibits slavery. So it's part of that process of becoming. So I like to think that's a good step in the right direction. Rabbi Boris Dolan, I don't know if maybe Bert Schumann, you know him because he served the congregation in Warsaw. He says, he has a take on this too, which says that it wouldn't have been a good idea had Israelites been totally separate from everyone else around them, because then they wouldn't have been able to influence anyone else around them. So if you think about, so slavery laws are a little bit more just, a little bit more compassionate. Sacrifice laws, no humans, we're sacrificing animals instead of humans. Some of us would say there's no distinction, but most of us would acknowledge, even how much we love our animals, there is a distinction. So he says, Rabbi Dolan says, that being part of the world allows us to make an impact on the rest of the world. So in this case, we can move the world towards becoming more compassionate if we already taken some of those steps. So he tells this really interesting story. He brings a really interesting story from the Talmud, which is where the rabbis are debating whether Jews should be allowed to attend the Roman arena where the gladiators are. You all know about the gladiators, right? So gladiators are fighting animals, they're fighting each other. And it was up to the spectators to decide if the person lived or died. And so the rabbis were saying, well, should we allow Jews to even go to this? It's so barbaric, it's so awful. We should maybe not even go. And so they actually did decide that Jews should never go to an evil place because it goes against all of our values of life and compassion, and right, we shouldn't go there. But Rabbi Natan retorts that in fact we should go, so that when everyone stands up to seal the fate of the victim, those who have compassion in their hearts can rise as one to save the person's life. Had we not been there, if there hadn't been compassionate, life-affirming people there, then maybe it would go a different way. So he's saying, be there so that we can make it better, which I think is fascinating. To not go to the arena would only be ignoring the reality of the pain and suffering that is possible. So I think that these laws and this portion, and what we know about the evolution of Jewish tradition, is to teach us that we're in the process of becoming. We're in the process of learning from those who came before us, learning from our own experience, and figuring out how we are going to proceed from there. And that really, when it comes down to us, Torah is about essentially life and compassion and justice and goodness, and that is a gift that we have to bring to the world. Even if it's step by step, evolutionary step by evolutionary step, that's our job today. Shabbat Shalom. We turn now to Returning the Torah to the Ark on page 256. Please rise in body or spirit as you are able.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkav shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren me'amo, tehillah lechol hasidav, livnei Yisrael am kero.
to Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, באמת מלכינו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום, והשיבות אל לבבך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, השמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, היום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Kaddish is on page 294. Sorry. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us in the last 30 days. Connie Black, Emily Brangham, Jean Gershon, Marcia Gumberg, Irving Krasnopoler, Fred Rock, Patrice Scher, Carol Wallach, Leonard Zimmerman. We also remember those who died at this season in years past and whose yahrzeit we observe on this Shabbat. Mark Alexander, Boris Barsuk, Ruth Berman, Harold Binstock, Merwin Brodsky, Bernita Buncher, Victor H. Cohen, Martin Feldman, Sadie Feldman, James A. Frank, John Gulas, Barry Greenwald, Bernard Halpern, Dr. Anthony M. Harrison, Leo Horn, Ethel Krieger, Ben Lane, Fanny Lazar, Barbara B. Lesser, Judith Levinson, James Malloy, Esther Palkovitz, Howard M. Rom, Rachel Rosen, Leah S. Rosenfield, Louis Rosenfield, Oscar M. Saperstein, Naomi Schneier, Morris Schwartz, Alan Selig, Minnie Shapiro, Sherman Shore, Franklin Z. Siegel, Joyce Solo, Reva Stept, Estelle Strauss, Joseph Tracht, Virginia Herzog-Vatz, Marcia Westerman. Any other names for Kaddish today? Zichronam livracha, may all their memories be for blessing. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Yamad divrach yurtei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chaychon uv'yamichon. Uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. B'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudashah baruchu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tishbechata v'nechamata. Damiran b'alma v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav. Huya oseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
You may be seated.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו
Our service will conclude in just a moment with
In Kelohenu.
Ein Kelohenu on page 322, I think. Page 322. Thank you to Greg and to Don and to Molly for beautiful music, and for Luke for making it sound great and helping people out there be with us this morning. Thank you to Drew for asking for the honor of doing a blessing in memory of your father. And Mazel Tov to Carol and Salem and the rest of your family on this milestone. We're really glad that you're here with us this morning. Don't forget there are some treats as we leave. So we'll conclude Ein Kelohenu, page 322, followed by Kiddush and Motzi.
Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו. סברי חברי, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן.
Come up and get a piece of challah after the blessing, and remember to take the books with you. Be safe out there.
It's really cold today. That's great. The simple-sized gloves. I don't know how that happened.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ.